It was near midnight when Wes Danner heard the knock. Not a loud one, just a soft, unsure tapping like whoever stood on the other side wasn't sure they wanted to be there. He paused at the sink, one hand holding a chipped coffee cup, the other still wet from washing up. Rain tapped at the tin roof. Out here, 10 miles past the edge of town, folks didn't come knocking at your door unless something was wrong. He walked slow to the door, shotgun leaning just behind the frame. Opened it a crack. A baby, wrapped in an old blue blanket, soaked through. Laying in a basket right there on the porch like a loaf of bread left out in the storm. And a note. Wes bent down, hands trembling. The rain hit cold on his back, but he didn't feel it. The paper was damp, ink bleeding. Just a few words written in a shaky hand. He needs a man like you. No name, no explanation. Just that. Wes looked up into the dark, the road a thin line swallowed by trees and shadow. Whoever left the baby was long gone. Maybe watching, maybe not. He brought the basket inside. The baby wasn't crying, just lying there, eyes wide, like he already knew something wasn't right. Wes lit a lamp. The yellow light made the whole cabin look smaller. Everything inside it suddenly felt too quiet, too still. He set the basket down on the table, stared at the kid like he was trying to make sense of it. He hadn't held a baby in 12 years. Not since Caleb. Not since that day on the river when the current pulled too fast, too strong. Wes had always blamed himself. He should have been watching closer. He should have jumped in faster. He should have saved him. It had ripped him and Annie apart. She couldn't stand the sight of him after that. Moved in with her sister in Kansas. Never wrote, never called. And Wes, well, he stayed. Built fences. Rode cattle trails. Drove into town once a week for supplies and kept his eyes down. Didn't talk unless he had to. Folks said he was kind, solid, quiet, but none of them really knew him. He didn't want them to. The baby gurgled, a soft full sound, and Wes blinked hard. His throat tightened like someone was squeezing it shut. There was no formula, no diapers, no bottle. He wrapped the baby tighter in a dry towel and sat by the fire. He didn't sleep that night. Just sat there, watching the baby breathe. In the morning, he went into town. Rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick with mud. People stared when they saw him carrying a baby in the crook of his arm. At the store, Martha behind the counter froze when she saw him. "Wes, is that?" He shook his head. "No. Someone left him on my porch last night. No name, just a note." She blinked. "Well, Jesus." Martha didn't ask anything more. Just grabbed formula, bottles, a blanket with little horses stitched on the corners. "Don't cost nothing," she said. "Put on my tab." He nodded, throat too tight to thank her properly. The sheriff, Alan Trigg, came by just after sunset. "You planning on keeping the baby?" Wes looked down at the kid, who was asleep now, one hand curled near his cheek. "I don't know. Well, child services will want to take him in. Might take a while. Closest office is in Cheyenne. I can make the call." Wes didn't answer right away. Alan leaned against the porch rail. "Who do you think left him?" "I don't know," Wes said again. But that wasn't true. He had a guess, and it made his stomach twist. Years ago, before the river, before Annie left, before everything, Wes had a friend named Nora Pike. She was wild back then, drank too much, laughed too loud, and ran from everything good. Wes never did more than talk to her, maybe sit with her under the stars when things were hard with Annie. Nothing happened, but she looked at him sometimes in that way. And a few months ago, she came back into town. Gaunt, worn out, baby bump under a threadbare dress. He saw her once at the gas station. She didn't say anything, just stared at him like she wanted to tell him something, but couldn't. Now he wondered, was it Nora? Was this baby his? He hadn't touched her. He was sure of that. But that didn't mean she didn't want him to raise the kid. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe she had no one else. But it didn't make sense. And then he remembered something else. There'd been talk in town, quiet talk, about a man named Rick Sutter. Used to run with rough types out of Billings. Faded from town a while, but showed up again recently. People said he was with Nora, that he wasn't right, that he hit her when he drank. If Rick was the father, Wes tightened his grip on the baby. He didn't want to believe it, But something in his gut told him this wasn't just about a scared mother giving up a child. It felt like something worse, something dangerous. And if that man found out where the baby was... Wes didn't sleep again that night. He sat by the fire, held the baby close, watched the shadows on the walls, and waited. 3 days after the baby showed up, Wes Danner was starting to run on empty. He hadn't slept more than a few hours, the kind of shallow sleep that left your heart racing and your mind foggy. The baby, he'd started calling him Jonah, cried at strange hours, wouldn't take the bottle right, and made these tiny choking sounds that sent Wes into a panic every time. Still, he couldn't bear the thought of handing him over to strangers. Out in the fields, Wes tried to keep to his routine. Feed the horses, patch the fence line, make sure the water trough hadn't frozen over. But everything moved slower now. He kept checking over his shoulder. Every truck that rolled past the property line made him pause. Every noise in the woods made his hand twitch toward the shotgun. Word had spread in town. They always did, quiet like wind through pine trees. Wes had a baby. Nobody knew where he came from. No one believed Wes was the father. Not exactly, but people like to talk. And once someone said something loud enough, it didn't matter what was true. That afternoon, Nora Pike came knocking. She looked rough. Her clothes were too thin for the cold. Her hair was flat and unwashed, tucked under a worn cap. But her eyes, they still had that same haunted shine from all those years ago. Wes opened the door, stiff with unease. "I heard," she said, looking past him like she was afraid of what she might see. "About the baby." He didn't answer, just stepped aside to let her in. She saw Jonah in the bassinet by the fire, bundled up and asleep. Her breath hitched. "That's him?" she asked. "You tell me." She looked at Wes. "It's not what you think." "Then you better tell me what it is." She sat down hard on the edge of the old armchair, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "I didn't leave him," she said. "I wanted to. God, I almost did. But I couldn't. Not like that. I gave him to someone I thought I could trust." Wes's jaw tightened. "Who?" "Angela Sutter. Rick's sister." That name turned Wes cold. Angela had always been a strange one. Lived in a trailer out by the quarry, halfway between here and nowhere. She'd kept to herself. Quiet. Watched people more than she talked. Wes remembered her hanging around the back tables at the bar, listening but never joining in. Everyone figured she'd gotten out of the mess her brother made. But now he wasn't so sure. She promised she'd get Jonah to someone safe, Nora said. She said she had a plan, that you were the only one who could keep him safe from Rick. Wes frowned. "Why me?" She looked up at him, eyes wet. "Because you're not like him." That should have been comforting. It wasn't. How do I know this isn't a game? Some twisted setup. Nora's voice cracked. "He said if I didn't give him up, if I didn't stop trying to leave, he'd kill him." Wes stared at her for a long time. He believed her, but there was more. Something she wasn't saying. "Where's Rick now?" "I don't know," she said. Too fast. Wes didn't press. Not yet. Later that evening, another truck came up the drive. Wes knew that engine before he even looked out the window. Alan Trigg again. The sheriff stepped out slow, hands in his coat pockets. "You got company earlier," he said. Wes nodded. "Nora, you trust her?" Wes hesitated. "More than I trust the silence." Alan looked down at the porch boards like they'd suddenly got real interesting. "You know, Rick was asking about you down at the pump station. When? This morning. Asking if anyone's seen you with a kid. Asking who you've been talking to." That settled heavy between them. Alan leaned in. "Wes, you gotta decide. If this kid's in danger, we need to move him. Somewhere Rick can't find him. Somewhere official." Wes shook his head. "No, I ain't letting him vanish into some system. That's what Rick wants. For him to disappear." Alan sighed. "You're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking better than I have in years." The sheriff paused, then lowered his voice. "There's more. Something you should know. Angela Sutter. She was brought in 2 years ago, over in Natrona. Smuggling pills. Charges dropped. No one knows why. Records sealed. Since then, she's been in and out of contact with guys tied to Rick." Wes stiffened. "You think she was sent to deliver Jonah to me?" Alan's jaw flexed. "I think someone's playing a long game. and you're in the middle. That night, Wes dreamed of water, rushing rivers, and screaming boys and Annie's voice calling from somewhere too far away to reach. When he woke, Jonah was crying. He picked him up and held him close, listening to the wind scratch against the windows. By mid-morning, Nora was gone. Left a note on the table. I have to try again. There's something I didn't tell you. I'll find you if I make it out. No name, no return. Wes folded it slow, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He drove to Angela's trailer. Gravel crunched loud under his tires. No sign of life. Door locked. Curtains pulled tight. But the smell, cigarette smoke, and something acrid like stale bleach lingered. He didn't break in. Not yet. But he noted the mail piling up in the box. No one's been here in days. Back in town, things were shifting. He ran into Clara Boone, the schoolteacher. She was sweet, younger, always offered a smile and a kindness folks in town didn't deserve. Clara had always looked at Wes with something gentle, like she saw past the edges of him. Now, she looked concerned. I heard about the baby. He nodded. Do you need help? She asked. Supplies? Food. Well, I used to nanny years ago, before I moved here. Wes looked at her, really looked. She had bags under her eyes, fingers twitching like she was trying not to say more. You okay, Clara? She hesitated. Then, Rick's been coming by the school, asking questions. What kind of questions? About you. About Jonah. About how often I see you in town. Wes's gut turned. Why you? I think he thinks we're close, she said, flushing. He's wrong. But, Wes, he scares me. Wes's voice dropped. Don't talk to him again. Not one word. She nodded fast. I won't. But something about the way she said it, like maybe she already had. Wes didn't say goodbye. Just got back in his truck and drove. The pieces were falling too fast now. Angela, Nora, Clara, Rick. Everyone had a piece of something they weren't giving up. By sundown, he drove back to the edge of his property and spotted the tire tracks in the mud. Fresh. Deep. Someone had come by while he was gone. He ran to the cabin. Jonah was still there, asleep. But a note had been slipped under the door. He ain't yours. He never was. But that don't mean you'll keep him. There was no name, just a smear of oil across the corner. Wes burned the note in the fireplace, watching the flames eat through the words. Whoever was coming for Jonah wasn't done yet, and Wes wasn't letting him go. The storm rolled in fast, wind howling like it was alive, ripping through the trees and rattling the windows of the cabin. Wes stood in the center of the room, baby Jonah tucked against his chest, trying to stay calm, but his heart thudded like a war drum. He kept thinking about the note. He ain't yours. He never was. Whoever left it knew too much, and they weren't bluffing. He barely slept, kept the shotgun leaned beside the couch, and moved Jonah's bassinet into the bedroom, wedging a chair under the doorknob out of pure instinct. The shadows seemed to stretch longer now, and every creak of the floorboards made Wes's grip tighten. The quiet wasn't safe anymore. It was loaded. The next morning, something inside him cracked. He packed Jonah into the truck, drove through the rising wind, and headed out to Angela Sutter's place. This time, he didn't knock. He kicked the door in. The trailer was empty. Stale beer bottles lined the counter, and the sink was full of gray water. The place stank, sweat, old cigarettes, and something rotten he didn't want to identify. In the bedroom, he found what he didn't expect, a stack of envelopes, all addressed to Rick Sutter. Most unopened, but one was torn at the edge, like someone had read it in a hurry. Inside was a letter from Nora. Rick, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I can't raise him alone. You said you'd change, but you haven't. Angela said she could find someone better. That's all I want. A better life for him. You said you wouldn't hurt him. Please don't come after him. Please. Wes stood there a long time, letting the words sink in. The betrayal sat like a stone in his chest. Angela hadn't just passed Jonah off. She'd lied. She played both sides. Maybe she thought she could outsmart Rick. Maybe she thought Wes would disappear into the hills with a baby and never come back. But now the trap was closing. That night, Wes pulled the crib into the kitchen so he could keep Jonah close. He laid out his old hunting rifle, loaded the revolver he hadn't touched in years, and waited. And as he waited, the past crept back in. 12 years ago, he and Annie had fought more than they talked. She wanted to leave this place, wanted a town with lights, with neighbors, with people who didn't ask questions or stare too long at the grocery store. But Wes was rooted here. His father died on this land. His grandfather before that. It was all he'd ever known. And when Caleb was born, it was the only place he felt strong enough to raise a son. Then came the river. It had rained for days. The banks swelled, the current twisted and fast. Caleb had run ahead, just a boy, fearless and wild, chasing a dog through the brush. One slip, one scream. Wes had been too far behind. He dove in, lungs burning, but it was too late. Annie never forgave him. The silence that came after that was worse than yelling. She left without packing half her things. Just drove off one night while he sat on the porch holding Caleb's rain boots in his hands. That kind of silence can hollow a man out. Now, holding Jonah, he realized the ache had never gone away. He just buried it deep. But this baby, it stirred something awake in him. Something dangerous. He couldn't lose another child. Not like that. By sunrise, Clara Boone showed up on his porch. She was soaked from the rain, eyes wide and shaking. "He's coming," she said. "Rick, he knows. I didn't tell him. I swear, he found me. He knows about the cabin, about Jonah. Let's let her inside." She stood by the stove, dripping water onto the floor, staring at the baby with something like guilt swimming in her eyes. "I tried to warn you sooner," she said. "He told me if I didn't help him, he'd hurt my brother. He's in Laramie. He works nights at the gas station. Rick knows where he is." Wes didn't blame her. She looked wrecked by fear. But the damage was done. He checked the locks, pulled the curtains, looked out over the empty pasture. "Go out the back," he told her. "Take my old truck. Head south till you hit the train line. Leave the keys inside when you stop. Someone will find you." "I'm not leaving you," she said, but her voice cracked. "You already did," he said gently. "Now go." She left without arguing. By late afternoon, Rick came. His truck barreled down the gravel drive like a storm. Black, dented, the passenger window busted out. He climbed out like he owned the place, shotgun slung lazy in one hand, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. He didn't look like a man desperate for a child. He looked like a man hunting something just for the sport of it. Wes stepped onto the porch, rifle across his chest. "Where's the boy?" Rick called out, grinning like this was some kind of joke. "He's not yours. He's got my blood. That makes him mine." Wes's finger twitched near the trigger. "Funny how you didn't care until someone else stepped in to raise him." Rick laughed. "You think this is about parenting? This is about control. You don't get to decide what's mine. Nobody does." The wind whipped between them, trees swaying like they knew something was about to break. "I read Nora's letter," Wes said. "She begged you to change. And she begged you to protect him." "Huh?" Rick sneered. "She never could pick a winner. You come any closer, I drop you right here." Rick's eyes glinted. "You ain't got it in you." But Wes had more than that in him. He had years of loss, of silence, of knowing what it felt like to lose a child and never be whole again. This time, he wouldn't fail. Rick stepped forward. Wes fired once. Not to kill, just a warning shot that split the ground inches from Rick's boots. Rick stopped, face darkening. "You made your choice." He turned, walked back to his truck, drove off without another word. But Wes knew that wasn't the end. That night, Jonah wouldn't sleep. He cried until his tiny lungs gave out, then whimpered until dawn. Wes held him through it, rocking slow, humming an old song he didn't even remember learning. By morning, Claire was back. "I drove south like you said," she told him. "Then I turned back around. I couldn't just leave." She looked different, steadier, like the fear had burned off in the storm. "I want to help," she said. "Not just now. For real. I want to be in his life." Wes studied her. "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to grow up without anyone fighting for you." He let her inside. Over the next few days, the sheriff came by. Said Rick's truck had been found abandoned near the Wyoming border. No sign of him. No body. Just gone. Wes didn't believe it. Not really. Rick was out there, lurking, waiting. But time passed, and Jonah started to smile. Wes filed for emergency guardianship. Child services made it hard, but not impossible. Martha vouched for him. Clara did too. Even Alan wrote a letter. Weeks turned to months. Nora never came back. But Wes sometimes wondered if she watched from a distance, making sure Jonah was okay. In the quiet hours, after the chores and the bottle feedings, Wes would sit by the fire and think about everything that had happened. About Annie, Caleb, Nora, Rick, the lies, the betrayals, the losses that stacked up like bricks around his heart. And then Jonah would reach for his finger with that tiny, perfect hand. And for the first time in years, Wes didn't feel hollow. He felt human again. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe Rick would come back. Maybe the ghosts would never leave him alone. But he made a choice. He'd protect this child, not because he was his, but because he was worth it. The thaw came early that spring. Snow melted in slow rivers down the hills, and the mud turned thick enough to swallow boots whole. Life on the ranch creaked back to rhythm, if not normal, then something close to it. But Wes felt it in his bones. The calm wouldn't last. Something was winding tighter beneath the surface, waiting to snap. Jonah had started crawling. He was strong for his age, stubborn, too, like he had something to prove. Wes spent long hours watching him pull himself up on furniture, fall back down, then try again. Every time he hit the floor with a thud, Wes flinched. He kept seeing Caleb's small body vanishing under that river. That pain had no bottom. Clara moved into the spare room 2 weeks after Rick disappeared. It just happened. Neither of them called it what it was, and neither of them pretended it was more. She took over feedings in the morning, helped clean the house, mended old shirts, taught Jonah to grip a spoon. She didn't press Wes to talk, and he didn't ask about her past. They made a quiet kind of team. Not whole, but surviving. Then came the letter. Wes found it folded into Jonah's baby blanket, left in the crib while they'd been out in the barn. No return address, just shaky handwriting and smudged ink. I told you he wouldn't stop. You thought he was gone. You were wrong. He's waiting, watching. He never left. Jonah isn't safe with you. He never was. Wes read it twice, then a third time. Clara found him still holding it an hour later, hands trembling. "Where'd this come from?" she asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't speak, just handed it to her. Her face changed as she read. Then something in her eyes, fear, maybe, or regret. "You should have told me he was still around," she said softly. "You should have told me you were still talking to him." Silence, long and sharp. "I didn't have a choice," she said. "I thought if I kept him calm, kept him away from you. You were feeding him information? Not like that. Just little things. Nothing that could hurt you." He stepped back like she'd struck him. "You don't get to decide what could hurt me," he said. She flinched. "I was trying to protect Jonah by putting a leash on a wolf." She blinked fast. "He threatened my brother. You think I could just ignore that?" Wes shook his head, the betrayal bleeding out of him like an open wound. "You should have told me. I thought if I did, you'd send me away." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She went upstairs without another word. Wes stayed by the fire, Jonah asleep in his arms, and stared into the flames until the morning sun stretched across the floor. That same week, Sheriff Alan Trigg came by, face pale and voice tight. "They found a body," he said, "out near Broken Bluff. Partially buried. Male. Shot twice. Looks like Rick." Wes swallowed. "You sure?" "Not 100%. Animals got to it. But the wallet was his. ID matched. The body's been there a while." Clara came out onto the porch, listening without a word. "Coroner's ruling it suspicious. Bullet pattern looks professional. Execution style." Wes said nothing. Alan eyed him. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "No," Wes said. "It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. But it wasn't the truth either." Alan looked at Clara. "You?" She just stared at the horizon. The sheriff left without pushing further. That night, Clara broke the silence. I know who did it, she said. Wes didn't look at her. I think Angela killed him. That name again. She showed up at the school 2 weeks ago, before the letter. Said I owed her. Said she did what no one else had the guts to do. You saw her and didn't tell me? Clara's voice cracked. I thought it was over. I didn't want to drag it all up again. I was scared. Of her. Of what she'd make me become. Wes finally met her eyes. We don't get to choose clean paths. Not anymore. She nodded slowly. No, we don't. Over the next few days, the pieces began to shift in terrible ways. The autopsy confirmed the body was Rick's. The sheriff reopened old files. Angela's name kept popping up. In property disputes, welfare fraud, a missing persons case from 6 years ago that never got solved. And still, no one could find her. But Wes knew she wasn't gone. One morning, he found the barn door open. Inside, a small rag doll sat on the hay bale where he fed the horses. It hadn't been there before. Pinned to it was a note. You took what was mine. I took what was yours. Check the freezer. He ran to the house. Panic, overtaking reason. Jonah was still in his crib, breathing, sleeping. He rushed to the cellar, heart hammering. Opened the old freezer. Inside, wrapped in burlap, was one of the baby's booties, covered in blood. He felt at his knees. It wasn't Jonah's blood, but someone was playing a twisted game. The phone rang not long after. A burner number. Female voice. You owe me, Angela said. I owe you nothing. You owe me your life. And his. I didn't ask for this. You took what was meant for someone else. Rick's blood bought that boy. That's not a debt you get to ignore. He hung up, but the fear didn't stop. Clara kept to herself, folding into shadows. The two of them didn't speak much after that. Trust had cracked and rotted at the edges. They shared a house, but not a bond. Then came the fire. It happened in the middle of the night. The barn first, flames licking up the old wood, horses screaming as they kicked through the stalls. Wes and Clara ran out into the cold, trying to throw water, but it was too late. The fire jumped to the tool shed. Sparks scattered across the sky like angry stars. In the end, they saved nothing but themselves. And when the flames were finally dead, Wes found a charred cross nailed to the back fence. Blackened wood, and scratched into it were 3 words. Blood for blood. The next day, he went into town. He left Jonah with Clara and drove straight to Alan's office. I want to confess, he said. Alan looked up tired. To what? To keeping Jonah. To hiding the truth. To lying about Rick. Alan sighed. We've got no evidence linking you to anything. You confess now, the state will take the boy. He'll go into a system that doesn't know him, doesn't love him. Weston backed down. Then tell me what to do. Alan stared at him a long time. You run. Wes blinked. What? You take that boy and you get out. Disappear. Start over. You stay, someone dies. And you? I never saw you. You were never here. Wes drove back home in silence. That night, he packed the truck. He didn't tell Clara where they were going. She didn't ask. But just before dawn, she kissed Jonah's forehead and whispered, Don't forget me. Wes looked her in the eye. Come with us. She shook her head. Already crossed my lines. Yours are still ahead of you. They drove for hours. West. Always west. He found a cabin in Oregon. Deep woods. No neighbors. No questions. Jonah kept growing. Sometimes Wes dreamed of Angela. Of the cross. Of blood. He didn't know if she was alive. Or if she was watching. Or if the past was just carved into his bones now, waiting to bleed through again. But he knew one thing. No one was taking that boy. Not again. Not ever. It began with a knock. Not the kind that comes with a friendly visit, but the kind that scrapes across your spine and makes the whole house go quiet. Jonah, now walking and prone to dragging pots across the kitchen floor, stopped mid-clatter. Wes stood in the doorway between the den and the front hall, heart already climbing into his throat. He hadn't heard a car, hadn't seen tire marks in the snow. Just a knock. Slow, heavy, measured. He reached for the shotgun behind the door, his fingers trembling more than he wanted to admit. Jonah stood at his leg now, gripping his pant leg, eyes wide and silent. Wes opened the door. Angela. Alive. Whole. Different. She wore a long wool coat the color of dried blood, boots caked in dirt. Her hair was shorter. A scar ran from her cheek to her jaw, pink and raw like it had barely healed. But the eyes, those didn't change. That cold, knowing blue, like a pond that held dead things at the bottom. Long time, she said. He raised the gun. Don't. I came alone. Don't matter. She stepped forward and looked down at Jonah. Her smile flickered. He looks just like him. Wes didn't lower the shotgun. Get off my porch. Angela didn't move. That's not how this ends, Wes. You know that. I didn't come to kill you. You've already tried. She shook her head. No, that was a message. This is the end. He felt Jonah clutch tighter to his leg. You think I'll let you near him? Angela's smile vanished. You think this is about the boy, isn't it? No, she said. It's about you. She stepped back slowly, as if inviting him out. You buried the wrong secret, Wes. Rick was a pawn. Clara, she was a ghost. You were the piece that mattered, and you still don't get why. He didn't move. You want to know why Rick kept that baby from his own kin? She asked. Why he didn't bring Jonah to me or anyone else? He didn't answer. Because Jonah ain't Rick's. He's yours. The world slowed. Angela kept going, her voice soft. You never asked. Not once. Just assumed Rick was the one Clara had been with. But the timing didn't fit. I knew it. Clara knew it. Rick, he figured it out, but he kept his mouth shut because he wanted to punish her. And you? No, Wes said, but his voice was hollow. Yes, Angela said, stepping forward again. You were drunk the night before Rick picked her up from that camp. You don't remember. But she came to you. She was scared, sick, and alone. And you let her stay. One night. That's all it took. His hands began to shake. You ran from it. All this time, you thought you were doing some noble thing, raising another man's son. But you weren't. You were hiding. Like always. You're lying. Angela pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, dropped it at his feet. Letter Clara wrote. Never mailed it. I found it in her old sewing box. Before she ran. He didn't reach for it. I was going to burn it, Angela said. But then I realized you deserve the truth, whether it kills you or not. Then she turned and walked away. Wes stood there long after her footsteps vanished. Only when Jonah tugged on his shirt did he move. He picked up the letter. The handwriting was Clara's. Wes, I didn't know how to say it. I figured you'd leave if I did. But you deserve to know. He's yours. I never planned to stay that night. I was scared and needed to feel like I still mattered. You were kind. And it all happened so fast. Rick never knew for sure, but I think Angela did. That's why she hates me. That's why I can't stay forever. You need to be his father. Not for me. For him. He read it 3 times before his knees gave out, and he dropped to the porch. That night, Wes sat in the dark while Jonah slept inside. The fire burned low. The silence was complete until tires crunched on the driveway. He stood up fast, the shotgun in hand again. He stepped outside, blood already roaring in his ears. Angela stood by the truck. She wasn't alone. Clara was with her. Bound. Gagged. Wes raised the gun. Let her go. Angela lit a cigarette. Calm as you please. She came back. Said she wanted to fix things. She lied. Clara's eyes were wild. Red. Her dress torn. She struggled against the ropes. Angela gestured to a small shape behind her. Another child? No. A doll. Burned. Faceless. See, I've been trying to burn the rot out, Angela said. First Rick, then the secrets. Now her. She didn't lie. Wes said, stepping forward. You did. To all of us. Angela cocked her head. Why would I lie? I had everything. I was next in line to raise Jonah. Rick knew it. You knew it. But then Clara left him the baby. You, the nothing brother. She walked toward him now, slowly. Always weaker. Always softer. You couldn't even keep your own son safe. He flinched. That's right, she whispered. Caleb, the first one. You remember him, don't you? His throat tightened. You looked away for 5 seconds, and the river took him. Wes's vision blurred. He cried out, Angela said. And you didn't move. I ran, Wes whispered. Too slow. She lifted the pistol from her coat pocket. A small black thing, finger on the trigger. And now you get to do it right this time, she said. Choose, Clara or Jonah. One walks away. You're insane. She smiled. No, I'm finally clean. Wes stepped between her and the house. You touch either of them, and you'll never breathe again. Angela raised the pistol, pointed it at Clara, and Wes shot first. The blast rang across the trees, echoing like thunder. Angela staggered back, gun falling from her hand. Blood bloomed across her coat. She dropped to her knees, blinking like she couldn't quite believe it. She tried to speak, then fell face first into the dirt. Wes stood over her, the smoke from the shotgun still curling through the air. His hands were steady now. He cut Clara loose. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. I didn't know she'd find me, she cried. I thought I was protecting you. He held her tighter. You came back. I couldn't leave you both. Inside, Jonah stirred. They sat by the fire for hours, waiting for morning, waiting for something to feel real again. Sheriff Trigg arrived at dawn. Wes told the whole story. Angela's death was ruled self-defense. Clara's record was never clean, but the sheriff knew justice had its gray corners. He let it go. Weeks passed. Wes took Jonah to the river where Caleb died. He set a small boat in the water, a candle lit inside, and watched it drift until it vanished around the bend. He didn't cry. Clara stood beside him, her hand in his. I can't undo the past, he said. I can't give him a perfect life. She squeezed his hand. He doesn't need perfect. He needs true. Wes looked at Jonah, barefoot, muddy, laughing as he chased dragonflies through the reeds. That night, Wes tucked him in. Your mama, he said, she was brave. Braver than me. Jonah blinked sleepily. And you? He asked. Wes smiled faintly. Still learning. He turned off the light. Outside, the land breathed in quiet again. Snow melted in the distance. Life moved slow but sure. And in that small house, lit only by firelight, a broken man and a bruised woman started over. Not because they forgot, but because they remembered everything and chose love anyway. Spring came late that year. The snow didn't melt so much as it surrendered, inch by inch, like it had no fight left in it. Trees budded slow, careful. Even the birds seemed to test their voices before singing like they meant it. Life crept back into the valley, and for the first time in a long time, Wes let himself believe it might stay. The sheriff came by once more, just before the thaw broke open the roads again. He sat on the porch with Wes, no coffee, no talk at first, just the creaking of old wood and the weight of what they both knew. You're lucky it ended like it did, Trigg said, finally. Wes didn't answer. You ever think maybe Angela was right about some of it? Wes stared out at the trees. Yeah, he said. That's the part that keeps me up. Trigg gave a short nod. Well, if you ever feel like talking about the rest of it, you know where to find me. Then he was gone, and the silence folded back in. Inside, Clara was piecing quilts from old shirts. It gave her something to do with her hands, something slow and ordinary. She didn't talk about Angela. Not much. But sometimes, when the nights got too still, she'd sit by the fire and trace the scar on her leg with her thumb, quiet like she was praying without words. Jonah asked about the woman in the red coat only once. Was she sick, he said. Wes didn't lie. Yeah, but not the kind you can see. Jonah nodded like that made perfect sense. She looked like she was crying inside. Wes blinked hard and tucked the boy's hair behind his ear. She was. Jonah never asked again. As the weather warmed, Claire started planting. Carrots, beans, squash. Said it felt good to put things in the dirt that might grow. Wes built a new fence, stronger than the last. Repainted the barn. Repaired the chicken coop. The work didn't fix anything, but it made the days feel like they had direction. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a death certificate. Rick's, along with a note. He confessed. About the smuggling. About Clara. About Jonah. Said he did it to make things right. Said he never wanted you to carry the weight. I promised him I'd send this if anything ever happened to you. Guess it's time. Signed only with a name Wes didn't know. Someone from the border, probably. Someone who knew too much and stayed quiet too long. Clara read it twice and then burned it in the stove. That chapter's done, she said. But Wes knew better. Some chapters don't end. They just stop being told out loud. A month later, Clara got word her charges in New Mexico had been quietly dropped. Someone pulled a string. Maybe Trigg. Maybe someone Rick bribed before he died. Either way, it meant they could breathe again. Together. She didn't run this time. Instead, she asked Wes to build her a porch swing. Said she wanted a place to sit where she could see Jonah chase fireflies in the evening. He built it in 2 days. She painted it the color of corn silk. They made love one night under the open stars, both of them older now, quieter in their bones, but deeper in their want. Not just for each other, but for a life they hadn't thought they'd earn. Wes sometimes dreamed of Caleb. In the dreams, he wasn't drowning. He was laughing, floating down the river on a piece of driftwood, waving back like he'd never left. And Wes would wake with tears on his face and Jonah curled up beside him, breathing slow and sure. Angela never came back. Not in letters, not in memory. The land buried her in silence, and no one carved her name in stone. That was her legacy. That was her ending. Clara, for all her pain and past sins, grew softer. Not weaker, just gentler. She braided Jonah's hair when it got too long, taught him how to stitch a rip in his jeans, showed him how to listen to the wind and tell if a storm was coming. Sometimes, when Wes watched her, he wondered how close he'd come to losing both her and himself. How easy it would have been to become a man like Rick, or worse, like Angela. A man who thought the world owed him something for his sorrow. He didn't feel owed anymore. One evening, Jonah asked him why the swing squeaked. Wes smiled. Because it's holding on. That night, after Jonah was asleep, Clara sat beside Wes on the swing and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think people get what they deserve?" she asked. Wes was quiet a long time. "No," he said. "I think they get what they can carry." She nodded. The next morning, he found Jonah asleep under the porch, a stray dog curled up beside him. He was grinning in his sleep. Wes didn't wake him. Instead, he watched the sky change colors from violet to pale gold and thought about how the hardest choices never really leave you. They just live inside you like scars, quiet, but always there when the light hits just right. He stood there alone while listening to the wind move through the trees. It almost sounded like forgiveness. Almost.